Welcome to the Digital Services Transformation Forum. I'm Charles Bartley, Enterprise Architect with ServiceNow. I'll be the first speaker, and Cassandra Kittle will be the second speaker. I'll let her introduce her topic at the start of her part of the session. So a little bit about me. I'm an enterprise architect with ServiceNow. I've been with ServiceNow about 8 months now. Prior to that, I was a lead global architect at a financial services company. And before that, for about 2 years. And then before that, I spent 20 years at a major aerospace manufacturer as a solution architect and enterprise architect. My focus has almost always been the IT tooling space. So ServiceNow's history of starting in that space has been a natural fit for me. So what I'm going to be talking to you about is designing for as a service. The point of this is future agility. Now, everything I'm going to say here is stuff I've lived and worked in my career. It's also terribly subjective. There's a lot of opinion. There's a lot of circumstances in it. What I'm sharing here is how I approach service design and standing up the ServiceNow platform and apps on it. Your mileage may vary. We welcome the discussion. So I'm going to start with a general assertion here. And that assertion is that many, maybe even most ServiceNow implementations start in agile fashion. They're focusing on an MVP. They want to get value produced as fast as possible. They roll out the platform in some initial set of applications in that minimal viable product configuration. And what you get is a tool that's used by specific users for that initial specific set of use cases, your MVP user stories. And usually there's some attempt at the non-functional requirements, what scaled agile would call the enablers, your completion criteria. If you're really good at all this, you're going to start dealing with governance, you're going to start setting up organizational change management training, dealing with availability, scalability, all the rest of the ilities, trying to get some common development processes. But you're usually treating these latter parts as an afterthought, because your main interest is get to value fast and deliver working value. And that's an awesome goal to have. What I'm going to propose here is this approach is kind of insufficient, and that there's a better way that designing as a service that will be almost as fast and deliver much more agility down the road, which will pay for that short delay in time and resources on your initial stand-up. So if you were to stand up a tool, and I'm using that word pretty deliberately here because that's how you're treating the Now platform, you're skimping on some of the early design and operational decisions that are going to limit you downhill. You're prioritizing those initial use cases. You're prioritizing sort of work fast as a team, get product rolling. And in the process, you're losing sight of some of those longer term issues that are really hard to change down the road. I made up a quote here on the right. We never thought that this requirement would change, so we didn't think we'd have to worry about it yet. The moment you say that as a designer, I'm convinced that requirement's going to come to you and hit you on the back of the head and make you deal with that requirement. That requirement could be something like what I call the 1, 2, or many problem. We assumed there would only be one production instance, but now we've got requirements for 2. Or we assumed English would be the only language because we only did work in the US, but we just expanded into Latin America. We just expanded into Europe, China, Middle East, wherever. We assumed there would be only one currency or one exchange rate or one capitalization rate. And all of a sudden, due to that expansion, we've got many that we have to deal with. These types of problems are predictable. They might be off in the future when that expansion happens, but they're ones where if you design assuming you're going to have many of those elements, or assuming that the regulation is going to change, assuming that you're going to potentially need to be able to scale in a different way in the future, you're going to leave doors open that you would otherwise close. When you hard code those decisions, particularly for your immediate use case, you end up with those closed doors. That future expansion's harder. You hear people frequently re-platforming. You hear of people having longer delays servicing, like the company that you just did a merger or an acquisition of. That sort of thing's harder because you close those doors early. So if there's going to be like one design principle out of this whole thing you take away, it's think about things at the start of your initiative to leave as many doors open as you possibly can for down the line. You don't have to build what's on the other side of the door. You don't have to spend time constructing. You need to build those assumptions into your system that leave the doors open. So what I'm going to propose here is that when you think of all the elements of the Now platform, the platform itself, the apps on top of it, not just as a tool, but you think about deploying them as a service, that mindset is going to put you in the right place for dealing with the challenges that I just said. So if you compared this to my previous diagram, I've still got the tool, I've still got the users or consumers, there's still processes involved. What I've added is a service fulfillment layer around the tool that interacts with the consumers. When you start thinking that way and you start doing the things that a service requires you to do, you're building in those open doors that are going to give you a competitive advantage down the line. And I'm referencing here from the Agile Manifesto that you're all probably familiar with, welcome changing requirements, even late in development. What I'm talking about here is early construction, early design patterns that help you actively welcome those changing requirements, because they're not that scary. They don't require things like completely re-platforming or starting over because you locked in your assumptions too early. So how does this solve for the future? There's a couple things that when you start thinking about that service fulfillment layer, it forces you to do. You start focusing on the customer's need and their experience, because they're the consumers. They're the ones that you're creating that service offer for. They're the ones you're writing the contracts with. It's forcing you to think about, from their perspective, how your service is constructed, as opposed to from the tool team or the tool's immediate users, which are often your service providers' needs. So that shift in focus, I'll talk later about a thing called externalizing controls. You're putting the controls of the service in the consumer's hand is a really positive design influence. It forces you to think about how you're going to protect your system from the volatile parts of that service. By volatile, I'm meaning the parts that are going to change continually, or the parts that maybe they're not changing all the time, but if they were to change, they cause you to start over from scratch again. Again, kind of going towards that re-platforming. Part of that protecting yourself from that volatilization is something that us architects like calling encapsulation. You wrap them in a little wall, make them independent services, and you formalize the interactions between those volatile parts and the less volatile parts. Your goal there is the parts that are changing are all basically wrapped in those walls. You can change those parts without causing change throughout the rest of the system. The parts that are more stable, you're not having to update all the time just because regulations change or mergers, acquisitions, etc. The third thing that designing as a service makes you is you've got to instrument your service for observability so you can see what's going on. This is where your metrics, your KPIs, your log analytics, the whole observability world, the monitoring world, they all come into play here. You need to be able to tell what's going on because you need to know when your service levels are being reached. And to achieve any sort of service repeatability, quality, etc., you're going to have to automate everything you can possibly do. So I mentioned earlier, standing up things as a service takes a little bit more time, a little bit more effort than going after that straight MVP. The two areas where that happens is you got to spend more time thinking and designing. Again, you got to be conscious of those doors that you're trying to leave open. And the second place is in build construction, you're going to spend more time on those observability, on those automations, on automating your build process, automating your service offerings, because those are the things that are going to let your service be sustainable and scalable.
Hey, Charles?
Yeah.
Somebody asked, I think Lou asked, is this the seam between a project to build a service for somebody and actually building a product?
Is this the seam?
Yeah.
I guess I don't understand the word seam there.
So instead of doing a project, we're saying build a product that more people than one can use. Is that?
Yeah.
I think Lou, did I characterize your question properly?
Yeah, it's product centricity with regards to the focus shifting from people in projects or still siloed because they're all working on different things, but they're not focusing on the product and product centricity. I'm trying to understand, is there a seam between that philosophy and approach and as a service?
Yeah, I think services are best understood in a modern context as part of the overall product management journey. So we've been generally in IT, we've had this evolution from, we started up standing up tools, ITIL 3 and IT for IT 2 started talking services, and then versions 3 of both of those standards started talking products. Those build upon one another. And so like the tool doesn't go away because you started doing service management. The service doesn't go away because you start doing product management. I think what I'm talking about here will become a little bit more clear here with the shopping mall analogy. And then I'm going to start getting into how to apply this, particularly with regards to the Now platform. So with the shopping mall analogy, if you treat the Now platform as a shopping mall, it will set you up as the right mindset for designing the services that you're needing. So in a shopping mall, you've got a large building on a large plot of land with a lot of parking. You've got a bunch of independent stores in that building. And one of the really critical parts here is the mall itself is a business. It's got its own business plan. It's got its own profit loss statement. It's got its set of customers, which are not, incidentally, the people coming in and out of the mall. The customers of the mall, the ones that pay the bills for the mall, are the stores that are there in the mall. Each store's got their own plans. The shopping mall, in general, doesn't tell the stores what they can buy and sell or who their customers can be. It might put some limitations where it says, like, for example, we don't want, I live here in Washington State, so we don't want pot dispensaries, even though they're legal in the state. We don't want those as a part of the mall. That can be a part of the mall's rules. But outside of that, sort of prohibiting things that don't go along with the mall's business plan, it doesn't dictate, okay, Nordstrom's or whoever, you're going to have a sale right now and you're going to sell these items. That's Nordstrom's business plan. So you've got a shared responsibility model. You've got contracts. You've got chargeback going on. You've got all these attributes of a service, which I'm going to get into a little bit more. And when you start thinking of the Now platform as analogous to the shopping mall, where the platform itself is the mall, the apps or the various stores in the mall, it's going to set you up with the right set of walls to do effective product management for both the platform and for the individual apps. One of the things you're going to want to avoid here in this situation is too many of the apps that are owned by the central platform team. So this is kind of tying in with the product management theme. This is impacting how you're arranging your teams. It's impacting how you're governing your teams. It's impacting the agreements between the teams. And what you want your platform team to be is that mall entity with the customers being the apps. You want the apps and the services that are wrapped around them be serving your end business. And when you combine those two, when you put apps in the platform team and you too tightly couple those two entities, what you end up with is a conflict of interest where the mall entity, the platform, is overly favoring its own apps, the apps that you're deploying as a part of that platform, at the expense of the other apps that are independent. And where you usually see this is ServiceNow was stood up in an IT context. It was stood up for ITSM, ITOM, et cetera. And the platform team and the ITSM and the ITOM team, they're all really good buds. They all sit next to each other. They're all working together. They're all part of that same central team. And along comes HR, and along comes supply chain, along comes field services, all the rest of the areas of the business. And what I'm talking about here is how do you set up the platform team to be successful for supporting the whole business, not just that initial set that they were targeting at the start. Did that kind of help?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
So I mentioned I get to what is a service here. First of all, it's one of the most overloaded words in architecture. I kind of hate it because you can talk to any 10 people and get 20 different definitions of what a service is that are all slightly different, and they will go on holy wars with one another in the architecture world to defend their point of view. So I pulled the definition from the CSDM draft 2, which was the most current ServiceNow definition. And even here, I think they kind of avoid answering really what is a service, and instead they describe what a service looks like. And the three things they call out here are you've got interactions with consumers, you've got offerings to those consumers, and you've got a fulfillment system. And I think these, particularly the sub-bullet here, the contract and conditions part of the offering, are those critical things that set you up for designing for fast and effective future growth. So the interaction with the consumers, when you're thinking designing as a service, you're formalizing those interactions. You're acknowledging the ones that you've got, you're acknowledging the potential ones that come down the line, and you've got to turn those interactions into offerings. And you got to figure out how to measure them, observe them, automate them, all those things I talked about on the last slide. With the offerings, you're figuring out what your predefined options are that you're going to allow your consumers to pick from. You can start doing things like differentiated service levels. I know one of the problems at one of my employers was we always designed everything platinum because we always had platinum use cases that demanded all the extra polishing, all the extra service. Well, a lot of our internal consumers didn't want the platinum. They didn't want the time that was associated with that. They didn't want the extra security controls that were associated with that. They wanted something faster and easy. So when you're designing as a service, you're always looking at a place where you can say, how can I do multiple service offerings? Let's offer some gold or platinum level for the people that need that. But how can I cut those costs and that time down to give cheaper, faster, better options for others? And how can I let each of those offers work independently? Like, I don't want all of the controls of the high security offering to be impacting anybody's. Maybe I need different sets of infrastructure to support that. In either case there, you're thinking those things out early, where all that's being spent is thought, time, and electrons before you're getting to the point where you've, again, closed doors to future expansion. And your fulfillment system, you've got people you've got process and workflow, and you've got automation. And going back to my original premise about how people start building tools and systems, they usually skimp on understanding the workflow and process. They usually skimp on the automation. They focus on, okay, they focus on, here's the initial set of users. I'm standing up incident management for the help desk. And they're not thinking, how can I repeat rolling out new capabilities over and over again, faster and faster, to support all of my consumers, not just that initial focus set. This is where you're focusing on automating the performance of your service so you can keep within your SLAs, keep your quality, keep your time, and then constantly improve your service. The case study for this, and I'm not going to drain this slide, but the classic case study for this is Amazon AWS. And when you guys get the pitch here, the links in the pitch, you can follow this, and you can just search for origin of AWS, and it'll bring you right to this article. Amazon started automating their infrastructure lifecycle because they had to. They had massive scale. They were expanding fast in the early 2000s. They just plain needed to automate. As they started automating, they realized they needed API, service catalog, all the rest of this, so their internal people could use what they were automating. They realized it was a core competency of the company. They realized they could turn it into a product, again, tying to product management from the earlier question. And now it's a massive, massive business. And that started because they realized this step two, they realized they needed to turn their automation into services, not just keep automating database install or web server install for their own use. There's a couple of design principles. Due to time, I'm not going to completely drain this slide either. I already mentioned the first one, encapsulate your volatility. You need to understand those parts that are going to cause your design to blow up or that are changing all the time, and you want to isolate those. You want to protect the rest of the system from that volatility so that future changes are easier to make. And again, this is where you start getting that downstream effect of getting faster and faster the more you go. Is you keep protecting yourself from the volatility, you're able to change the volatile parts, you're minimizing the blast radius on future. Just good general design principle. Automate everything. One of the things you're trying to go for here is what I call the snowball effect. You start small, you automate the little actions. Every time you automate a little action, it lets you automate a bigger action the next time you come through. The next time you do that, you can start automating an even bigger action. So start, like in my background, we started with automating server builds. Then we started automating web server builds. Then we started automating database server builds. And all of a sudden we could automate full application installs. And now all of a sudden we could automate multiple application installs. You want to look for things that give you that snowball building effect, where the more you automate, the bigger things you can automate. Again, all small, all isolated, all encapsulating the volatility. You want to pay attention to these service design details before you're paying attention to the solution. So I think this is where enterprise architects have a particular responsibility when they're defining, when they're out there saying, we've got this new demand for a new app in our environment. They should be thinking of this as a service, and as they're helping to fill out, here's the description of that new app, and here's the business case for it, and we're going to get it through portfolio management, we're going to get staff funded, prioritized. They should be describing that in terms of the service and those elements I talked about earlier. The service offers that are going to be a part of that service. It's going to need knowledge bases. It's going to need organizational change management. It's going to need service levels. It's going to have metrics. It's going to need ITSM and ITOM support as a part of that. And they should build these things into their plan and proposals. The negative of this is you just increase cost and time because it takes time to do these. The positive is, again, you're setting yourself up for future, faster more agile execution, because you know all of these things are going to change. Don't spend too much time polishing any of these, but you got to be thinking about them from the very beginning. The last one here is externalizing your controls. Fancy term, I learned it from one of my main mentors. It's meaning put all the levers and controls of your service that you possibly can in your customer's hands. And it's saying you best serve them when you realize you don't control what they do with your service, why they're trying to use it, any of that, just like the mall doesn't control what sales Nordstrom has or what products Nordstrom's selling or any of that. But those controls are in their hands so they can use it to solve their business needs. And when you start thinking that way, going back to, you start protecting the important parts of your system that need to be protected. You build those automated guardrails in for the things that you truly can't let your customers go because they'll blow up other customers, that sort of thing. And you want to spell out those limits that you're to your externalized controls plainly in your SLAs and knowledge-based articles. So I already kind of broached this one talking about ServiceNow platform as a service. Your main customers on this are the other apps because they're the ones who pay you. They're the ones who are like the stores in the mall that pay the shopping mall. So when you start thinking about those interactions, your primary interactions are going to be things like, how do I support onboarding new developers and new development teams onto my platform? When do I need more instances? When do I, because I'm expanding to new geographies that maybe have different sets of regulations? What happens if I bring new business units? Again, the mergers, acquisitions, divestitures. Those are going to cause changes. Your ServiceNow as a platform team should have plans for those different types of interactions, and they should have offerings that support those different interactions. Maybe the new instance offering isn't going to be used very often, and maybe we don't build that in our MVP, but you know immediately you're going to need to onboard dev teams to start working on whatever apps you're onboarding. Turn that into a service offering, turn that into something repeatable, build in the knowledge articles to help a new dev team get up and going. Start thinking about your SDLC pipeline as a service offering. You're saying, like, we're going to promote, we've got a dev test prod environment. Here's how we promote code between those. Here's how you insert your update set into that pipeline. Here's when we upgrade the platform. Those all become repetitive, routine things because you've designed and automated and documented and trained everybody on how to do those. And then you've got the fulfillment system, which is fairly self-obvious. The next one here, service catalog as a system. I put this one in to show that design for many instead of designing for one. Assume there's going to be multiple service catalogs needed. Assume that new business units or changing requirements are going to require that. So how do you automate that? Make an offering for getting new catalogs. Make an offering for the people that are going to be building the service offerings themselves. Start thinking about them as customers or consumers of your service instead of maybe trying to do all the work for them. How do you support multiple developers, each touching their own service catalog items at the same time instead of necessarily one central dev team? You're going to have things like coding standards. You're going to have peer reviews. You're going to have, again, the knowledge base documents. You're going to have training that you're going to need to develop. This is going to take time for initial stand-up, again, at the expense or at the benefit of massive agility down the line. I wanted to leave you with some references. Being a good architect, I'm reading all the time. These two are two that particularly influence things in this pitch. The first one is ancient. Like, this book was published in the early 2000s. My current boss at ServiceNow actually introduced it to me more than a decade ago when he was consulting at one of the companies I worked for. And it's called Architecture Patterns for IT Service Management, Making Shoes for the Cobbler's Children. And the basic premise of the book is we in IT know how to do service management. We know how to do product management. We force our customers to work with us that way, but we don't do that for ourselves. We leave our own kids without shoes because we're so focused on our end customers. And that's what we do in that initial premise that I said, when we just stand up our tools, when we focus on that MVP without all of the ilities, without all of the elements of a service, we're literally making our children walk around without shoes here. We're not doing the things that we know are best practice when it's our own work. We need to stop that. We need to be thinking better. And then the second book, Juval Lowy is former research fellow at Microsoft. He's credited as one of the inventors of microservices. And this is one of the best books I've ever seen for architecture and design for that whole thing I was talking about, encapsulating volatility. He's got a repeatable method in this book that works very well with the ServiceNow platform, in my opinion. I think it's a brilliant book. I think everybody should be reading it. Its main focus is how to build software fast, repeatable, sustainable by encapsulating volatility. So I highly recommend both of these books. Were there any other questions there before we get to Cassandra's part?
I think you've answered most of them. Anybody, I think I got all the ones off chat. If anybody else wants to chime in.
Charles, this is Mitch. Just going back real quick. So you talked about the concept of the ServiceNow platform team owning the mall, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think I said this earlier.
I think we lost you.
Oh, you're breaking up, Mitch.
How about now?
That's better.
Okay, sorry. So yeah, so did you say earlier that the ITSM team might own the various ITSM applications, or are we considered still sort of the customers of those applications?
So how I would treat it is the platform is one set of tool with its services.
Yeah.
And the ITSM apps are another tool with their services. And there's a dependency between the ITSM tools and services and the platform tools and services. What I would avoid is combining those two into the same tools and services org. Again,
Okay.
like setting yourself up for future expansion. You know, if IT gets on the Now platform, eventually HR and everybody else
Yeah.
will. You're wanting to make sure that both of those groups can go independent.
Separate but connected, right? Because there's, yeah. And then related question. So what about, how do you deal with cross-platform functionality like notifications or things that expand beyond just one sort of type of application?
So I think you've got two options. And for notifications, I think that one's comparatively easy. I would say that's a part of the tool and service offerings of the platform team.
Okay.
When you start getting to other ones, like let's say virtual agent, I'll say is one of the ones I run into most frequently, where it's a bigger, more complex thing. It's still got to be applied in the different apps, but there's multiple apps that can be a consumer. I would probably treat virtual agent as its own tool with its own service, as its own product with its own product manager, etc. And again, I'd say virtual agent is dependent on the platform team. And then, for example, incident management is also dependent on virtual agent.
And service desk to some extent, like interactions. I follow your logic. I appreciate that clarification.
Now the downside of that is you've got more project managers, you've got more scrum teams, you've got more independent entities that you've got to manage, more headcount you've got to staff. But I think the overall agility benefits of that are going to overwhelm that.
Yeah, I think it scales well for large organizations, but for small organizations, maybe 50, 75 IT, maybe this model has to be sort of streamlined.
Yes.
You know, you might have multiple hats. So, all right, I appreciate that.
I think, Cassandra, I think you should be able to share okay, right? Let's see.
Yeah, sorry.
Good.
Trying to find the unmute button.
Because thanks, Charles. I know we had a bunch of issues with that with Teams, so hopefully with Zoom we're getting past that a little bit. I've had a lot of problems. It was.
I'm just trying to see if I can share. So everyone can see my screen, right?
Yep.
It
Perfect.
should say CSDM and service mapping.
That's right.
Okay, I am a ITSM manager at El Paso County in Colorado Springs. I've been in this particular position for about 2 to 3 months, where previously I was a problem change and configuration management process owner, which is a mouthful. In that position, I started the implementation of CMDB and CSDM, and then extended that into my ITSM manager role. In a previous life, I was an implementation lead for a ServiceNow implementation and a business relationship manager, where I have the viewpoint of focusing on delivering value or desired outcomes to the customer. So a lot of the conversation that I have in this presentation, my end goal is to deliver value to the customer. The customer, in my case, may actually be my fellow IT organization members instead of an end user, but by helping my teammates, they can deliver the value to the customer. So that's my end goal. When I start talking about my implementation of service mapping, I'm starting in the common services data model at the application service level. The service mapping activity itself is done through a standard UI. Basically, I'm working, none of this is done in a silo. I'm working with product owners or an application specialist or someone who basically knows what the entry points are and knows what the architecture should look like for that particular digital product. When we develop the map, we're actually looking at how it's going to be tied to the business service offering and the business service or technical service in some cases. I find that the service mapping is especially useful for the technical support group, specifically to do root cause analysis, checking on other incidents that might be in play, things like that. So right now I'm showing you the agent workspace view on a incident. The reason why I'm using agent workspace is because I originally thought that you couldn't get to the service mapping on the standard UI. I have since figured out that you can. It just takes a whole lot more of clicking and knowledge of how to actually get there. So the value in Agent Workspace is you can view the details of an incident without going to another environment. In this case, once you select the business service, the service offering, and the configuration item and save the incident, you'll have the affected CIs and impacted services/CIs populated, and then these information icons become available. When you click on that information icon for like the business service, you can see the level 1 relationships and access the dependency map, as well as see other service offerings under that business service. One thing I'd like to note on this particular view is we are still in the development service definition phase. As I meet with product owners to review the service mapping and the service design, defining all the attributes of the service to include the groups, the SLA, this model ID and version shown here is a little tricky because it's not how you get to it the way I'm going to show you. But as I meet with them and we define all the attributes and we get into a production environment, more information will be available, such as the CI health, the groupings that I just talked about, and the SLA. When you click on the dependency views, it opens up a nice map that displays all the connected CI levels to your filter definition. Most of what I'm showing is out of the box with no changes. However, I have asked for a default filter to be applied on the dependency view to exclude any file directories, tracked configuration files, and disk drives. The reason why I did that is because the addition of those CIs creates a lot of noise, and we just don't want that bogging down the view of the different CIs. The icons
Cassandra,
are, yeah?
Is there any uses for those things? I'm wondering, long term, would you just exclude that from discovery if you're not using it?
From what I understand, I should not exclude those. I just don't know for sure because I'm pretty new and I'm still looking for a CMDB admin.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
You want to be careful with that.
So on the details view, with the selected icon, you can see associated CIs, the incident, the problems, and the related services. There's also these icons which are configurable. The Lego looking icon is where you can get a pop-up showing the related affected CIs. The list looking icon is a listing of the CIs associated with the parent CI. The wrench is an indicator of associated problems, and this exclamation with the triangle is a notification of associated incidents. The service offering information is very similar to the business service. There are some differences in the detail area, mainly associated with assets for some reason, but the dependency view is in the same location and you can see the level 1 relationships here. This is an example of what the service offering dependency map may look like, and I'm highlighting the different icons. Security requested that I do not show you any server names, any IP addresses, etc. And that's why it's heavily masked. On the service, on the details tab where we have the CI as a service map, when you click on the info tab, it shows the service map information. And this can be an extremely powerful tool for the network services group. For example, the server administrators may stop on this particular view as they're looking at the connections from one server to another. But through the more icon, a network services person can go to the advanced map, click on a connection and see the network path where they can drill down to an affected switch, router, etc.
Are you doing any event mapping to those right now?
Not yet.
Okay, that's the goal though eventually.
Yes, it is. So We're probably at INO maturity model 1-ish, trying to get to 2-ish, which means we have a lot of service definition to get through. And when I talk about that service definition, I'm talking about establishing an overall SLA program,
Mhm.
which I want in place before I even try to broach event management.
Yeah, that's a lot of questions we get all the time is, what do I start with? It's like, just start. There's a million starting points, right?
Right. So I talked about the application service and the business offering and the business service, and you're probably trying to figure out, well, how did you, or probably wondering, how did I make that connection? And the way I do that is by creating a service along with its service offerings through the service builder application. So this is an example where my business service is enterprise resource planning. Our service offerings are more on sub applications of that service than it is on gold, silver, platinum. We're a government organization. You get what you get. We're not offering frills and whatnot. Sorry. So on the definition on the operations section, there's an area where you can associate catalog items, dependencies, and that service mapping that you created for that service. So if I had a, and I think I do, I just need to work with the product owner to find out what those catalog items are. I could associate those catalog items here to make that bridge between the catalog and this particular service definition. On the dependencies, I might have technical service offerings that I want to associate. So on another one, I might have something called account provisioning and deprovisioning technical service that I would put here. This particular portion is at the bottom of the screen. So I'm trying to indicate that here. There is a tie that brings you to the service portfolio. And if you've set up business applications, you can make a connection there that will actually show up in your service portfolio. So a service portfolio through the digital portfolio management might look something like this, where you have, if you've made that establishment of a business application here, along with your service offerings and your business service, you could look at technical services in this portfolio. It's really configurable. And this all items allows you to select that you just want to see business services, you just want to see service offerings, or applications. I don't remember, but I think you can also say you just want to see technical services. This needs attention column allows the product owner to see right away that there is a P1 incident, that there is an upcoming change, etc. When they're looking at, the product owner is looking at the business application, they can see the number of incidents, problems, and changes on the Run tab. I do not have all the applications turned on in my dev environment, such as the GRC. So if I were to do a live demo, I would show a couple of errors on this. So if I look at the business service, a product owner is really concerned about the upcoming influx of information into the service, as well as what is actually going on with the service. So I can't work in a silo again when I'm working on the implementation of this. I have to reach out to my PMO office to say, hey, can you make sure that you're including these elements so that I can see it in the digital portfolio management? When I'm working with the OpEx group, I'm reaching out to them to say, hey, what are your plans for improvement initiatives? How can we make sure that we're totally visible on what's going on as far as improvement initiatives with the services? On the business service, I can also see changes that have happened, how many changes there are, what the backlog is, that kind of thing. So one of the, I'm going to stop sharing.
That's really nice. Have you got any quick question before you go on to the next one? Have you got any feedback from the solution owners on, hey, I need more stuff, or this is great, but I need that? Are you getting into that yet? Or
Yes, I am. So at the beginning, I said I'm focusing on delivering value to the customer. In my case, for this particular effort, sorry, I was reading a chat thing. My customers are the technical support groups, the different support groups on how they will use the tool in order to do their root cause analysis or see the other events. One of the concerns that has been raised by customer support or the service desk is I still need to see what's going on within the environment, which caused me to push the use of Agent Workspace so that they could see the dependency views. From the network services group, they have a concern about how this all works with change management. So I have a lot more testing to do. Has something to do with, I'll come back to you, Christine, has to do with, they have a tier 3 layer, and how do we make sure that we're not associating 200 CIs with a change when it's not really associated with 200 CIs. From the product owner view, there is a lot of interest in on the service offering. You can have subscriptions. How do we target communications to the subscribers for a service offering when there is an upcoming outage, an upcoming or an actual event, incident event, that kind of thing.
okay. I wonder, yeah, I guess it would be off an outage and not necessarily the solution owner being able to mass email all the people that are subscribed to their own service, right?
Right. They just, the thing is, our subscribers, if you will not be coming to the portal to view outages. We have to actually push it to them.
Got it. Okay. You got a bunch of questions coming in. You want me to read them to you? So you don't
Yeah.
have to read them all? Okay. Are the service desk agents selecting the CI, or are they trained to select the service and then the offering when you're on the incident ticket? And if so, are these all cascading?
This is a point of contention right now. So they have not been selecting business service offering, or even the CIs consistently. We're doing a mass OCM effort to roll out the business services as we have them defined, and to train the different groups on how to use Agent Workspace, basically using the ADCAR method. Hopefully you know what that means. To do guerrilla marketing for Agent Workspace, digital portfolio management, etc.
Okay. And then you are using service mapping, right?
Yes, we're just starting. Okay. So one of the things that we've gone into is the pattern. So right now we're focused on on-premise applications. We have not worked on the cloud services yet. We're trying to make sure that we get one thing right before we try to add on to that thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And Alan asks, you're connecting applications to catalog items. You're doing that in the builder too?
Applications, I'm actually connecting them outside of the builders. So the
Oh, I'm sorry. He
application.
says applications and catalog items into a service.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Do you use service offerings for each of them?
I am forcing the product owners to define service offerings.
Good for you. And I appreciate what's behind that statement.
All right. And there's, we got 2 more minutes, so I'll go down. The use service portal status page for communicating out the status.
Can't really do that.
Okay.
Just our customers are very distributed. It's basically citizens. So it's,
Got it. Okay. And I'll go quick because there's a bunch of them. So we'll do definition of OCM.
organizational change management, otherwise
Okay.
known big change management.
Got it. Okay. OCM, organizational change. Oh, Greg answered that already. Okay. I'm trying to keep up with some of
Thank
these.
you,
here.
Mitchell.
Do you have subscribers defined in all offerings that are tied to the catalog items?
We are trying to.
Okay. And so a lot of the offerings are going to just be everybody, right?
Actually, no. So, for example, Department of Health Services might have a different set of subscribers than Pikes Peak Workforce.
Got it. Okay.
Did you notice in regards to that question, I'm sorry, did you notice that the if you didn't have a subscriber that impacted your user portal? That's the
No.
issue we're having, where the catalog item disappears if there's no subscriber.
Oh, I think it's because we haven't fully implemented the subscribers yet.
Okay.
Yeah, Lou ran into that problem you're talking about. Like,
Yeah, you have to set the used for the other related lists, because if you associate a catalog item with an offering, it will disappear unless you explicitly then on the other related lists let all users see the catalog.
Okay. I'll have to keep that in mind.
yeah. So we're out. I'll try to get back to everybody's questions on here. Got a lot of accolades on the presentation, so great job, Cassandra. I'm glad you jumped in. I'll make sure I'm a little more explicit. I know there were people, 2 very different topics today. Charles was real deep on architecture, and Cassandra was really into the operations aspect. So we had different people on for different things, and I didn't do a good job of making sure the agenda was staged right because certain people. So what I'll try to do is, if we're going to have vastly different interest areas, like an architect area versus a operations area, I'll be sure to call those out in the future on the agenda so that you can, if people want to come in for certain topics and not others, they can do that. So I know we had some people that really come forward to the architecture who might have come in later. And then, so what I'll try to do is I'll try to stage that, unless they're pretty close together. I'll try to stage it out like that so that we can have people coming in for specific areas of interest. And then I will get the topic out. I know we're out of time, so I'll get the topic out for next week by this Friday. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.